Welcome back to another episode of Cyber Conversations. I am so excited to be joined today by Warren Small. Warren is well and truly embedded within the cybersecurity ecosystem. He is a founder, an investor, and a builder within the industry, and somebody who has a phenomenal thought leadership approach that I think everybody really deserves to hear from. So, hence, he is here with me today. Warren, an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. Why don't you maybe start by giving the audience a little bit more of an introduction to yourself?
Hey, Katie, thank you so much for making the time. And what an incredible pleasure to spend time with you and share a little bit. Warren Small, I'm based in beautiful California. I'm not sure if that's for my good fortune or for my sins, but I'll take it whatever it is because I love California. I've been here now on two tours of duty and absolutely call this home. I've been in the cybersecurity industry for the last 2 decades and have always had a passion for innovation and helping clients solve problems. So that was a perfect formula to help founders or early stage companies build the right technologies. And I naturally gravitated to becoming an investor in early stage companies because over the last 2 decades, I like to call myself a bit of a closet entrepreneur. Always had the itch to build something, but felt too comfortable inside a large corporate because you had the good fortune of having good conversations and still having some security. But a little over 15 months ago, I decided to graduate and build something of my own and started Castle Ventures, which is an incubator of ideas, an incubator of others' ideas, and an incubator of great opportunities to try and help make the world a little bit more cyber resilient. So lovely to talk to your audience today, Katie, and great to get to meet you more.
Honestly, Warren, what an introduction, right? And to anybody tuning in, you can probably already immediately see the value that this episode's going to hold. And you've had a phenomenal journey. You touched base on it a little bit there, Warren, but I think we should dive into a bit more detail because so many people I think can look at the individuals that have had a journey like yours where it's you've got to that investor point of view and it's how did you get there, how did you go from being in some form of capacity within the industry to that evolution, because I think for a lot of people that's a really exciting trajectory, but they can't always necessarily see how that pathway builds. So it'd be interesting to see just how that natural kind of opportunity came from all the stuff that you've been doing over the past several years you've been working through cyber.
Well, Katie, if you ask anyone in my family 2 decades or early on in my life, if I'd be an investor in early stage companies, they'd say no, because I'm absolutely not a risk taker. Growing up in South Africa, growing up in a small city called Durban in South Africa, you don't get the opportunity, or you at least don't see the opportunity of creating something new. And job security is something that everyone aspires to. It's something that my wife and I often talk about because when you at school, when you focus on a good education, when you focus on graduating with a good qualification and hopefully getting a secure job. And then maybe the biggest risk you take is you move from the coast, which is a small city, inland to Johannesburg. And I was very, very fortunate, very, very fortunate early on to start I call it my first cybersecurity, I call it my first startup was Internet Solutions. They were the internet service provider of South Africa and was very, very fortunate to work with founders who were naturally networkers and naturally people who always wanted to have a conversation. And I'd say I learned from them because there was always a narrative or there was always a strategy of, adding one plus one, but to equal five, as opposed to making it equal two. There was always that. How do we do something together? So, how do we come together and make something a little better? And I can remember very early on, people would always come to me and say, Warren, we'd like to talk to you and we'd like to talk to some people that you know. There was always the conversation. There was always the conversation, whether it was changing. I remember changing the fax machine to being it connect now having your faxes delivered to your email, or whether it was internet backup, but not internet backup as in an internet backup line, but putting all your storage in the cloud. That was many years ago when before cloud was a concept. And they would always come to me and say, well, we'd like to have the conversation. And I'm an avid learner. Katie, if it's one thing I'd say to all your listeners, is don't stop learning. Like
Yeah.
always, always listen. And that's the natural connection to investing is
Yeah.
being able to be a good listener and having an innate desire to learn. Because a lot of people, we talk about this today called unconscious bias, and we always making a decision based on what we see. And I live it every single day. People, Katie, they look at me and they kind of come up with a story, but then they hear me talking and then it's confusing. And for the first 10 minutes of any conversation, people are like, wonder where he's from. I'm like, just ask, right? Or take a guess. So back to, if you ask my family, they'd say Warren would never take a risk. And I think it's that ability to listen and that desire to make things better, which got me to an opportunity to transform our cybersecurity business inside of what was then called Dimension Data, or NTT. And my executive, who I give all the credit for, he said, "Well, why don't you join me in some meetings in Silicon Valley?" And because I'm a passionate person about human beings, and I'm always trying to understand why, like, why did you do this, and why are you building this, and why do you think it's a problem worth solving? Is he left that trip saying, "Warren, I think I'm going to ask you to incubate what we would then call our early stage partners, because as a what we would call a services company or a systems integration company, there was always a need to bring innovation back to the customer, because they wanted to see. The customers didn't have the luxury of traveling to North America or traveling to Israel to get access to this early technology. So having someone like Dimension Data or NTT that was the trusted partner, we were serving two purposes. One, we were sharing with our own stakeholders a little bit about innovation or the market changing, or we talk about to our customers who were hungry for innovation and had an insatiable appetite to listen. So that got me back into Silicon Valley, and I call it my second tour, where I started investing in early stage companies as NTT Dimension Data, and started meeting a few friends. And I'll tell you, it's probably the hardest job anyone will ever do, and I have the most empathy for founders. I think they are my own kind. We both dream. They are a little bit braver than what I am to go and build it and fail. And I want to invest in them so I can keep giving them advice so that they don't fail. At least say, hey, how do we help you? And then I decided that I met some incredible founders, some talented human beings, and I thought, for all the opportunities that we got at NTT, there were probably five or six that we missed. As in missed, and we didn't have the opportunity because we'd see it happening, right? And I'd be like, this is such a missed opportunity, and how do I get myself involved or more immersed in this community or this ecosystem? And just started talking more to founders. And I made a joke this morning of how so many people don't make time. I made a joke, because there's some people who you think, how do they do that? But it's because they make a conscious effort to make time, and they make a conscious effort to connect, like how we connecting today, Katie. And to your listeners out there, is take the time just to meet someone new. It's not an opportunity to network; it's an opportunity to learn something. It's an opportunity. I'm also one of those crazy people that if I'm in an airport or I'm sitting next to someone on a plane, I want to say hello, because I feel like there's a reason. There's a reason we in seats next to each other, right? It's not because maybe I like the aisle, you like the window, and that's why we're sitting next to each other. So that's how I got to where I am, and it's been an absolutely incredible journey, and incredibly fulfilling, because I feel like I just am so much more fulfilled with the friends that I have. They're not my investments; they're my friends, and they're not something that I feel that's going to solve the problems. I'm learning from those founders, whether it's AI today, or whether it's non-human tomorrow, or whether it's exposure management yesterday. I'm learning, and I'm really passionate about being the best person that I can be in this lifetime.
No, it's fantastic, and it's always really inspiring to hear that sentiment run throughout. But I think there is one key sentiment that you really mentioned that rang true throughout everything there, and you touched base on it at the end when you use the word networking. And I like the way that you phrased it, that you don't need to view it as networking. You use it as a learning opportunity, connection opportunity. What can you get from this conversation in a really nice way? And what can you give to somebody as well? It's like this shared, I was going to say shared unity, but I don't even know if that makes sense, but you know what I mean. And I think in security in particular, right? This is something that I talk about all the time. It's something that you talk about all the time, and there's a reason for it because I think it's a superpower. I always say this. I think if you have the ability to know how to get people connected and see, oh, this person and this person are worthwhile meeting the same way we had it happen, it's like magic. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts because obviously it's helped accelerate your career, it's opened doors, it's opened opportunities, and it is also most likely because you're a networker, done that for other people that you are closely connected to. Why do you think it's so impactful? Why do you think in security, where we are working with software all the time, we're also working with people, but why do you think it has such a significant influence and can really make a defining difference as to whether it's something you make time for or something that you don't?
Katie, I mean, what a profound question. I'll come back to the concept of learning, and I'll come back to sort of the point that you exist to learn and to grow. And I think that's how people need to lean into this this philosophy of making that connection, because you're so much better off on seeing the other side. And that's true to customers. That's true to investors. That's true to founders. That's true to everyone. I can tell you so many stories where I would see people on a website who are supposed to be a reference for that company, but the founders never ever met that person who's on their website. So I'm like, why would you do that? Like, why would you do so? If someone else asked you that question, why did Joe Soap make this decision? And you can't answer. All of a sudden, that's creating a little bit of maybe not so, right? Not really a testimonial. But I think there's so much magic to your point in learning a little bit more from the other side. A little on 48 hours ago, I met the first person I know from Alaska. And all of a sudden, I was like, okay, well, this is the first person I've met. I live in North America. We talk about Alaska. There's so many stories about how Alaska became Alaska and why it's not part of Canada and why it's not part of Russia. But like the first person I know who actually grew up. I've read a book. I've watched a podcast of people who've kind of grown up in Alaska, but I've never met a person. And to then hear their perspective on time or their perspective on life is an opportunity to learn. And I think founders relish in having the opportunity to listen to another founder, or relish in an opportunity to listen to a customer who's had a bad experience, or just to share. I do it naturally. And I said to a friend today, I said, don't channel being the best chef. Channel being your nonna, because he's an Italian guy, right? Don't channel being like you want to communicate with this precision, but just be like your nonna. Like your nonna would throw a bowl of food at you. Like, and enjoy it. And it's delicious, right? As opposed to this fine dining experience. Still delicious, but it's be authentic. So I think there's an opportunity to learn. There's an opportunity to learn from that chef. There's an opportunity to learn from the nonna in terms of just that cooking analogy. But I think there's such a great opportunity just to learn. And don't be selfish with your own time. Don't be people will say I'm busy. Like I'm super busy. But I'll tell you, I can see the difference in people that are intentional versus that people don't have a purpose. I can see it. Because if you're sending an important document to somebody and they don't even respond saying thank you, there's no connection. Like there's
Yeah.
no connection. Or automatically you know that. So don't ever send them again because they don't value that. So why waste your time? Rather spend it with people who are gonna come back to you and say, hey, listen. And yes, there's many reasons that they were very busy or they just didn't have the time or there was an emergency at home. There's lots of stories, but if they do it all the time, why do you keep trying? So go somewhere else, learn something new.
I love the way that I love that analogy that you mentioned because I think that circles back to authenticity, right? Like in this industry in particular, people ultimately now they look for great products, they look for great things out there, they look at ROI, but they also look for authenticity. Does your brand do what it says it does, or does it just have a load of magical words on there that make it seem like you solve these problems, but actually underneath the surface you don't? Do the people care about the end user, and do they actually care about this, or are they just out there for the financial gain? Like, I think that really circles back to a lot of what you discussed there. And I imagine probably something that you've seen the same sentiment shared throughout when you've obviously used your own advice within
Yeah.
your career.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, Katie, if you're listening, right? You're clearly listening. I'll just share a small story with you so that you can take that with you and your listeners can take that with them. Is if you don't know that someone is a dog lover, right? You fail to miss the opportunity to connect. I connect more personally because I try and understand who is that person. What do they really represent? And some of them are like they shocked for the first 2 minutes because I have nothing to offer because you're not going to learn from me. It's not. I'm going to take everything from you. So let me just learn a little bit more that's important to you, and then try and tell you a story or bring something that's important to you. And there's so much you can learn from people more than just their cyber lives, right? They'll tell you a story about a dog or how important their dog is to their family. There's so much to learn. So it's not just about
Yeah.
cyber.
I agree, and I think sometimes people forget that when it comes to this. The networking doesn't just mean what's your job, what do you do, and how can we be of use to each other. Sometimes it's like, am I going to be thrilled when I see your phone number is ringing me right now out of the blue, and I'm going to answer it, and I'm going to be like, what are you doing calling me? How are you? That is
Mhm.
the superpower. Having
Yeah,
that
that's the
ability to
superpower.
have, yeah, that's what you want to get. And not everybody is going to be able to do that. Cyber's full of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not more people. But if you make sure that then you've got this really great influential circle that you spend your time building, that is definitely where you can elevate your networking superpowers, and also where you can add value, because then if you're calling someone up and they go, oh, how, as if you're calling me, I'm excited, and you're asking them and saying, oh, I need you to help someone or do this, then again, that's it
Yeah,
comes round in circles. And I think that it's really sometimes misunderstood how important it is, but also what it actually means. It's not just sending a connection request on LinkedIn and being like, oh, we're connected. There's so much more depth that can go into it to really maximize. And the again, the superpower, that's our buzzword for this one, is that's what's going to be
exactly.
picked up.
Make it
um
intentional.
yeah, exactly this. Now, Warren, I want to pivot the conversation slightly because I mentioned something earlier that I actually think could be really worthwhile looking at, especially now that you've moved into the investment side a little bit more, and you're having this really holistic perspective on what's going on in the industry. You have the privilege of working with some phenomenal founders, and you already have an incredible network. And I think one thing that has been a bit of a hot topic off the back of RSA and just the kickoff for the year really has been around some new technology, more specifically, the fact that the industry is now very AI heavy. Mm. And there's a lot of conversations around that. And where I really want to take this is I want to talk into the strengths and the weaknesses of how AI is impacting the industry. Because I think a lot of people will talk about the fact that there's the buzzwords that's being thrown around, even to the point now where agentic is almost becoming the buzzword that we're seeing. But I think what maybe could be worthwhile diving into is, like I say, yes, it's great. It means we're innovating. It means that we're working with some incredible technology. But there's definitely downsides to it as well that people can't always identify. And sometimes I also think some people are scared of it and they shouldn't be. So I'm interested to hear both sides of the coin from your personal perspective, from what you've witnessed from the founders that you work with, the other investors that you collaborate with, and just from your inner circle. Let us in on the secrets.
Yeah. I would kind of say how much time do we have because there are so much value in just your question. But I would say it's this is an opportunity of embrace. Like you really, really have to embrace this conversation. I sent a video earlier to my wife because we have this conversation like almost every day, and also as I said to you earlier with my son, we have this conversation as well. The bad about AI, and I will tell you whether it's using technology or tools like Calendly, which is, to be very sincere, this is my first experience with an agent, right? Because that's what it is. Like, it really is an agent. Or talking to one of the cybersecurity leaders at one of these applications that make connections when you order food and communicate to the company where the food's going to be made and to the driver who's going to deliver the food, and think about all the intricacies in those processes. And I remember a story many years ago. I talk about banking, and I'd go to a bank, and I'd say to the bank, how many websites do you think are vulnerable today? Like, how many websites do you think are vulnerable? And Katie, no matter what percentage I gave, people would believe me. If I said it was 80%, or said it was 70%, or said it was 20%, or said it was 40%, people would believe me. And all I was doing was I was trying to ascertain to myself. So if we knew then how many of these websites are vulnerable, and we knew it's because of humans that were doing the work, then isn't there merit today? Because it's not gone any better, right? It's we've got more websites, and it's not like we have everyone kind of checking everything. So isn't it better that we now have technology that allows us to check the code that is being developed before it's pushed into production, right? And it's like someone looking over our shoulder. I'll share a story which I'm incredibly passionate about, because it's we spoke about Calendly, which is that agent, but now we're talking about Mythos, which has got everybody. It's like everybody's talking about it, right? Boards are talking about it, news agencies are talking about it, people at home are talking about it. But Yoran and I were talking about this 48 hours ago. We talk about every single day, but it's no different to what it was 5 years ago or today. Is that now you need to have made the investments in technologies, and Mythos is now creating a sense of urgency for you to go and fix what I just said a few minutes ago, that nobody was looking over the shoulder. So now you have you know so is that a pro? Is that a weakness? Is it a strength? Is it a problem? What is it? My point of view is it is absolutely merit in having AI agents, large language models, is absolutely merit. But the adversary, like any other human, who doesn't have a friend and is going to talk to an LLM and think that response is the right response, it's the same kind of challenge, right? We've got to make sure that there are the right guardrails in place. People talk about hallucination. I don't think people really understand it. So, are we doing the right level of education? I look at it and I'm absolutely blown away, because 2 years ago, 6 months ago, we were talking about a normal device, as in the same Mac device that you use with applications, call it Word. But now there are so many more applications that are not traditional applications that are on your device. And the traditional security controls that are protecting your traditional device, can they pivot to manage these other applications? And therein lies new technology, therein lies new AI. One of my founders, who I absolutely admire, or I want to say love, but I don't want to, I don't want people think I'm that soft. I respect him so much, is because they built an AI, they built a product that allows the user to protect him or herself. Because what people don't realize, because they're not thinking about it, right, is that they're using a version of, call it Claude, which is not issued by the company, and they're trying to put company information into a public version, which is not allowed. But like, how does the user know? Because the user just signed in. The user signed in. They didn't sign in because, and they're trying to move fast, right? But this document, this AI will say that this document that you tried to put into this, sorry, it's classified, or it's got confidential information, or it's got this client data. You might want to put it in a corporate version of Claude. So is that good AI? Absolutely. Another one of my founders who created this AI in a mailbox, right? And the AI in your mailbox is going to say to you, Katie, this email that you received from Joe So does not seem legitimate for these three reasons. So if you can verify now, 5 years ago, you said don't let the user make any decisions. But now we're saying AI or this agent in them is helping the user make good decisions. Where's the negative? The negative is that if organizations don't take control of this, because my view of the world is we have I shared that app with making all these decisions on our behalves, and now we have all these agents that are making these decisions out on our behalf, and we got to make sure that we understand who is the owner of the agent, and how do we make sure that what the agent has access to is secure. And Katie, this all exists, but I guess it's like anything in life. I told you earlier, people don't make time. So if they're not making time to listen, they're not making time to prioritize, they're not connecting with the right individuals, how are they going to make good decisions? There's going to be a catastrophe. There's going to be a catastrophe. And that's my concern. My concern is 10 years ago, I was in an Asian country, Katie. And in this Asian country, I happened to be at an airport authority. And the airport authority was telling me that introducing IoT will risk the lives of passengers. And if you don't secure it, and I was trying to understand that in their language, but they said in an airport, it's all about time.
Yeah.
Everything is allocated. Like you don't take off on time, it has a ripple effect, right? There's a lot of coordination. How many people fail to acknowledge that there's a ripple effect? So if you have a baggage carousel that is broken and can't put bags on a plane like that, they've got to let the pilot know, they've got to let the radio control know, they've got to let the airport traffic controllers know that, hey, we got a plane that's not going to take off on time, right? There's a process that goes on, but people don't take consideration to all these things that exist. But that's why technology exists. So I could tell you many more stories, but I don't think we have time for it.
I know. What a coincidence, right? That time thing. Hey, it's a shame we
Yes.
don't have more of it. But I love the way that you always break things down, Warren. I think you make it really digestible, but also for it to resonate. And I think to close out on here, because I agree, we could yap all day long, to be honest with you. I want to ask the question that we talk about there. You talk about some of the excitement, some of the challenges, some of the real life implications of what we're seeing with modernized technology and how it affects the day to day for people that they don't necessarily always realize. But if we're looking to the future, right, we're seeing an unprecedented amount of startups come into the space. We're seeing so much kind of innovation. We're seeing just so much creativity. Problems are being solved that we didn't even realize were problems that are then creating new problems because then suddenly agents, for example, prime example, something that's just come through and now we're like, well, this now causes a load of issues. There's all of these different layered things that come into play. But what I want to ask is, what are you excited about? Let's look ahead. We've got the rest of the year. What excites you about what we're building, what we're doing, what's going on in the space, all of these things that we've talked about here today? What is it that kind of gets you going and saying, yeah, this is what I feel optimistic and positive about for the year?
Yeah, so I think finally we thing that I've been talking about for years, vulnerabilities. I think Mythos is now going to get people to act. One of my companies, who one of the founders personally, I think he has a great opportunity for the founder to be seen because he's created a platform. They call it the agentic exposure platform, in which is now going to help because people just couldn't get to it, right? It's like having
Hmm.
a fire hose, trying to small fire hose that could use to water your garden and now take down a building, right? Or try you just can't do it. So that's what I'm really excited about. Is it's going to encourage, and hopefully there'll be some regulation that will follow that as well. In terms of, I think you'll definitely see us bridge the gap in terms of skill and risks, because every organization that I talk to is embracing agentic. So they know that agentic is an extension of. Yeah, whether it's a security testing or whether it's a normal task within a business, they know agentic is going to be embraced, and I'm truly excited about it. And then I think lastly, we're going to put the power back in the hands of the user. We're going to empower the user to be a little bit more secure, because nobody's talking about my mother. Or there was a I saw something on the news the other day. There was a an agency or bank that was created, that was a fictitious bank taking people's money, right? Because all the tools exist, but who's protecting those individuals? So the banks will now have tools in place to pick up this deep fake and be able to help their consumers be a little bit more safeguarded. So that's what excites me. But with all that excitement comes a lot of fear. And I want to underscore the fear, because fear is a cause of inaction. And I think there's no excuse. There should be no excuse for people not to take action. It's not about money, because there's definitely money being spent. And I've heard so many times people say, "Oh, I'm just going to renew that because I don't have time." Well, what happened to you not having money? So you've got
Yeah.
money. I think there needs to be some common sense brought back into it. And I think there needs to be the accountability that a lot of organizations now have. There will be that common sense enforced upon them. Because if it's not, there's going to be an incident that I just hope there's no harm done to people, but we will see. We will definitely see some outages. We'll definitely see some incidents, and we'll talk about it like we've been talking about others.
No, I think a great way to close it out. And Warren, just a great conversation in general. I think you've got your enthusiasm, your passion for the industry and for the people in it is just so infectious. And I hope everybody that's tuned in has really felt that. And naturally, to anybody that's tuned in, Warren is an open book. If you want to hear a little bit more about his thoughts,
Absolutely.
his feelings, reach out, get connected with him. I can promise he's an awesome guy. And thank you so much for joining me. Honestly, it's been a pleasure to have you on. Obviously, to everybody tuning in, like I say, get connected with Warren. Make sure to subscribe, share this episode with any of your security peers, or maybe some founders or anybody that's interested in just hearing a bit more about the space. I think this is a relevant one for them all. But that is it for today. So thank you for joining, and I will see you all next time for more conversations that are shaping cyber.